All right, y'all. So in this video, we're gonna talk about squatting. And so when Vibe actually shows you what the type of squat we're gonna show you here, we're gonna show you on a Smith machine. This is a Smith machine because it basically applies to a goblet squat, a body weight squat, a barbell, like a freestanding barbell squat, or a Smith machine squat. So when it comes to squatting, there's a lot of nuance out there, but the parts that we're gonna touch on, we're gonna start from low to high. And so let's talk about the feet first. And so a lot of the times you'll see people have very strong opinions on how your feet should be looking with a squat. And a lot of that stems down to also the reason that people think there's supposed to be a correct way to squat is because they're looking at Olympic lifts and Olympic squatting. And yeah, in Olympic lifts, if you're competing in a sport, then yes, there is a certain way your squat has to look to be counted as a rep. But in our world, which is just the general fitness, I wanna make you healthy, I wanna make you big and strong world, there's a lot of different things that we can play with. So starting with the feet, you might see some people have railroad tracks. You might have some people have just a little bit out, and some people have their feet, like their toes, really far pointed out. And honestly, a lot of this depends on where your knees kind of want to go naturally, and that's going to be stemmed from what your hip sockets are doing. And so the one thing we don't want to see though is your hips not tracking with your toes. So if I was going to show you a negative demonstration of, yeah, see how our knees are kind of pointing in, and let's do even more. So point your toes outward. This is a negative demonstration as well. So her knees, it's probably really uncomfortable, so you can come out of it. So her knees are not tracking with her toes. So the biggest thing to start with is to experiment with kind of what angle of toes. And then as long as your knees are tracking with your toes, I'm okay with that. So once again, knees tracking toes means, let's go and do one rep here. Her knees are tracking over her toes. And then when it comes to the depth of the squat, once again, that's gonna depend on kind of what you have own and control. If you're a long femur McGee, then you might have more of like a bent over squat. If you have shorter femurs, like a lot of CrossFit athletes, you might be able to just go straight down. Viva and I are that awkward in between where we're not quite like long femur McGee, but we definitely don't have like, you know, small femurs. Yeah. And so let's go ahead and get under the bar here. If this is your first time doing a Smith or a barbell, one thing you can't see is the bar is resting right on the meat of her traps here. If you ever try a barbell squat and it hurts the back of your neck, it means it's too high up, don't do that. And so the next thing, if we're starting from low to high, we've talked about your toes, we've talked about your knees tracking over your toes, talk about kind of your hips a little bit, and that honestly is because different hips sit differently, so that's gonna depend on, where you put your toes. Next thing is, let's talk about your bracing in your core. And so one of the tips or cues I like to give is, imagine there's a line of water right here. So before she goes down, she has to take a nice big inhale in, and it's hard to see here, but she's bracing her core by creating a barrel effect with her core. Yeah, you can breathe, it's okay. And so think of it as like a soda can, right? If you step on an unopened soda can, it's really strong. If you pop the top, it gets weak. So before a squat or a deadlift, you wanna brace your core. It's gonna go out in all directions. And so there's a water line here. So let's go ahead and show what a full rep would look like. Nice big inhale. She's going down. She is not breathing until she gets back above that water line, right? If you breathe at the bottom, especially if you're lifting really heavy, you're gonna compromise your core. You're gonna lose that pressure, and that's when injuries might occur. So once again, water line here. Let's show them a good rep. Big, nice inhale, going down. And you can see Viva gets all the way down. Stay at the bottom for a second, but breathe. It's fine. You're not lifting any weight. You can see that her butt is slightly lower than her hips. Awesome. She has that range of motion. If you don't, that's okay. Go on and come on up. Next thing, rack it up. Next thing we can talk about is the different emphasis you can put on squats. And so, grab those wedges over there. If you want, or if you see a programmed, a heel elevated squat, we have these handy little blocks we got for like 30 bucks on Amazon. There's really expensive ones, there's really cheap ones. If you don't have these or don't want to invest in them, that's totally fine. You can always get some flat barbell or plates or whatever to put behind your heels. Essentially the idea is to lessen the angle of your ankles, so that way we can get as much knee flexion as possible. So you can see she's going all the way down. And even though she had a really nice deep squat over here, now you can see the angle of her knee is as flexed as possible. She gets a nice big stretch. She can come up. And so this is a quad dominant squat. We're taking her glutes out of the equation a little bit, not fully, but a little bit, so that we can focus the emphasis on her quads. So once again, she's going down, getting a nice huge stretch, getting as much flexion out of that knee as we can. And so you might want to use this if you have your knees aren't the best and you want more emphasis, you want to strengthen up your quads, or maybe it's just more comfortable for you. And so you can see these blocks are kind of an extreme angle. You can always play with getting like little 2.5 or 5 pound dumbbells, putting them behind just your heel. And so your toe rests on the ground, and create that angle as well. You might find it more comfortable. And then, yeah, or a normal squat is going to be a bit more glute dominant. But once again, if you have long femurs, you might find that your squat is a much more of a hip hinge like that, more bent over, and probably can't even get that low. And that's okay too. So the biggest thing with any kind of squat pattern, like I said, first, play with the foot angle, right? From railroad tracks all the way to really far pigeon toed. Next thing is make sure your knees are tracking with your toes. So make sure your knees aren't caving in or going all kind of crazy directions. The next thing is so far as how far down your hips go, that's going to be kind of what you have own and control, right? So never force a position you don't have or that causes pain. If you can only go down as far as like here before your knees start hurting or you feel like you're unbalanced, awesome. Just stay here. Live in this range of motion is totally fine. A way to track progress is if you can get a little deeper, and that's okay too. And then lastly, bracing your core. Pretend there's a water line here. So every rep, you're not breathing at the bottom and losing and compromising your core. Brace, control it, take your breath at the top and at the bottom, and then play with it, have some fun. This applies to literally every single squat, from air squats to goblet squats to barbell squats to suitcase squats or whatever the case may be. It's all the same form. It's just different places you're going to hold the dumbbell or the weight. So if you have any questions, let me know.